birds, people, and the dogs that bring them together. This is episode number 42. My name is Bill, and you're tied to the Woe Post. We're counting down the days to puppies here at the Woe Post and Gallant Gun Dogs. Here in about a week, we should have about 10 goofy little brown and white puppies squeaking away in the whelping room. In the meantime, I'm going to try and get a couple easy hunts in for Skeet before she's locked in with her babies for a few weeks. The new whelping room is just about done. I still have to pull the vacuum on the mini split that I installed, and I have to assemble the new whelping box provided by friends of the podcast, Easy Whelp. I'll be sure to provide pictures and feedback on their fab system once I get it put together. Speaking of friends of the podcast, I'd like to thank my Patreon patrons who pledged $3 per month to keep the podcast going and have access to exclusive monthly blog content. If you'd like to become a patron, head over to patreon.com/thewopost and sign up. So the story goes that sometime in the early 1900s, a small brown dog was found wandering stray near the Methodist Church in Spartanburg, South Carolina. One churchgoer decided to adopt the dog and took it home. Since the dog seemed to show phenomenal hunting aptitude, the new owner sent the dog to his friend, Mr. L. Whitaker Boykin, for training. The little brown dog developed into a very good turkey and waterfowl dog. This dog is believed to be the inspiration behind the Boykin Spaniel, which would later be developed by Mr. Boykin from a cross of Chesapeake Bay Retrievers, Springer Spaniels, Cocker Spaniels, and American Water Spaniels. They're now the state dog of South Carolina. Boykins are small dogs. Males average 15.5 to 18 inches in height. Females about 14 to 16 inches. They have a medium, straight to moderately wavy, solid, rich liver or dark chocolate coat and may have a white blaze on the chest. They're mostly popular in the American Southeast as a smaller, prettier alternative to Labrador Retriever. Today we're talking Boykin Spaniels with Michael Barnes from Valley Way Kennels in Huntsville, Alabama. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Michael Barnes, Valley Way Kennels, here in Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville, Alabama in Central Time, which I probably should have picked up on that because I was stationed in what used to be Fort Benning, Georgia. Now it's Fort Moore, Georgia. So I know where the time zone changes.
Man, it happens more times than not, man. And not to mention the time just changed yesterday. So what's 5 o'clock here is, or 6 o'clock here. It normally should be 7. So I'm all backwards right now. So
yeah, I was in my office doing some work and I walked outside and it was dark. And it was only, 6:15. And I was like, what happened?
oh yeah,
What happened to the day?
yeah. And keep in mind that's 5 o'clock. So we're on the eastern side of the central time zone. So 5 o'clock rolls around and it's dark. So
It's
the
dark,
days are short
dark
now.
early.
Yeah, that's right.
So you are breeding and training Boykins.
That's right. Yep.
So a Boykin person knows this, but not everybody's a Boykin person. So we should probably explain that Boykins are more retriever than they really are, flushing dog.
I'll be honest. When I got my first Boykin, I had zero intentions of anything other than just having the dog go pick up a duck for me. And that was my sole purpose of getting a Boykin. Not to mention I wanted a dog that was kind of a good buddy and my friend. That was really my aspiration that I had for the dog. It really wasn't several years later when I was at an HRC event, running that dog. Was running him in a season test, and they had an upland. They had an upland flight, and this was at the Mid South Retriever Club here in North Alabama, and they had an upland test, and they had some spots available, and in that given weekend, I want to say that I was able to run him in both flights. I had a couple other dogs run. I can't remember if I ran him in season and in upland, but I want to say that I ended up running him in upland, and just watch, and that was a lot of fun. So it really wasn't until I started doing that once I realized and started to get exposure to the the flushing aspect of the dogs.
Sure. Now, how did you start out with bird dogs?
Man, I say, my background in bird dogs started with, really wasn't around birds. It was around tracking dogs. Back in the day, I grew up deer hunting in Owasso, or when I was a kid. We had a club in Owasso, which was in Connecticut County, Alabama, south central. That was back in the early '90s, where dog hunting and was pretty prevalent in the area. And I grew up with beagles, and that was kind of the my first introduction to dogs. It's funny because that was when I first started getting involved with dogs and being around them. I was terrified of them when I was a kid, but I just liked watching them. Fast forward several years, I never had a dog growing up until we always had small dogs. I want to say we had a miniature schnauzer when I was growing up. Always a big duck hunter, always a big hunter. And it wasn't until I started to get into college when I really started to get into waterfowl hunting. I've always dove hunted and always waterfowl hunted, but it really wasn't until I really got into college when it was, you know, I was hunting quite a bit. And that's when I wanted to get a dog. And so it kind of transpired into, well, what dog do I want to get? And, the easy button is just to, slap a Labrador retriever on it
Hmm.
and call it a day. But I think hindsight 2020, looking back was, I had been raised around small dogs between beagles and schnauzers, that it kind of was, it wasn't that I was against a lab. It was just, I kind of wanted something different. And so when I was in college, I realized that I wanted to get a dog. And, I started kind of researching breeds and trying to figure things out. And, I went to Auburn, and I was driving on Toomer's Corner, and I'll never forget. I saw somebody walking two dogs, and two little brown dogs, and I'd seen that look before, and I had my roommate was from South Carolina, and I started putting two and two together, and that was my first real introduction to a Boykin Spaniel. I was driving down the road, seeing two on the side of Toomer's Corner, and then, man, I went home and just was infatuated by it, and just dove right in. That was probably 12 or 13 years ago. And, that's fast forward from that about a year and a half, 2 years later is when I got my first one. So,
Now, when you saw these two dogs walking, with their owner on the side of the road, did you already know that they were going to be strong retrieving dogs? Did you recognize them as Boykins and kind of understand what a Boykin was?
not really. I mean, I had an idea, and I want to say, man, it's been a while since I want to say that I knew what a Boykin was, but, you know, 15 years ago, Boykins were not as they weren't as prevalent in the hunting community that I was involved with, right? So when I say that, I love to duck hunt. I love to, where I hunt is, a lot of in the Arkansas and woods, the big rivers. I grew up hunting Gunnersville Lake, which is a larger body of water, hunting divers. They really weren't involved at all. And so I really wasn't exposed to them in that sense, like they might have been in other regions. So when I saw them, I kind of knew what that was. And, back then that, social media really wasn't, prevalent to the point where you could really gain quick knowledge about breeds or, quite frankly, anything nowadays. So when I saw that, it was really just Google and learning and understanding it and reading tons of books and resources. And then that's when I started to realize that, hey, this is the dog for me. Um, there was one of my fraternity brothers had got a Boykin not long after that, and he let me, I think they were going out of town, and they let me babysit him for a few days. And this was, keep in mind, this was 12 years ago, and so I took the dog and I just fell in love with it. And that was when it clicked for me, and I said, now we got to find the puppy. So that was when it really started.
So the first time you see these two little brown dogs with this kind of wavy hair and maybe some top knots,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and then you get to babysit one, and then you're like, yeah, I could make this happen.
It's funny because the Boykins can vary so much. You say the wavy coat, and I want to say that first month of my research, I found one that looked like a straight poodle or American Water Spaniel, and it was
Oh
just
wow.
curly. There are a lot of variations with the coats of a Boykin, and I knew what I liked, and I knew kind of that standard that I wanted to stay around. But it was funny just because you know a lot of other breeds, a lab or a Brittany, a lot of those coats are pretty normal as far as the characteristics of it. But Boykins do vary, and a lot of people may not realize that. So,
And what's your preference in coat?
I like a little bit. I don't like it too curly. I prefer some wave. Their coats do fluctuate through the years or through the seasons. Oftentimes it's if I can have, to me, a light wave with some kind of curl that comes off of their back and over their withers is kind of what I'm looking for. I like a heavy kind of mane on the chest. And then that's typically what I prefer. Don't get me wrong. There's no rhyme or reason or wrong. It's just that's kind of my preference and what I've tried to shoot for over our breedings.
Yeah, I think certainly, if you're hunting flooded timber, you want a dog that's going to have a strong guard coat. It's going to protect it from the debris in the water that either it can or can't see, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
then again, I don't think you want a guard coat that's so long that the dog,
Yep.
hinders the dog swimming, right?
Yep. Yep. And I think that, the cold piece on Boykins is, but personally, I don't think it's breed specific. I think it's more personality. And I say this a lot, just, I get calls, the calls that I get from prospective owners that they're looking for a puppy. One of the things that they ask is, well, I hunt this, can they take that? And I try to get them to understand is that they are going to vary. I mean, look, I've seen some labs that get too cold, and I've seen some Chesapeakes that get cold. It just depends on the situation. There's certain dogs. I mean, I've got some that I've had in training in the past where, I can only train them. There's only some of them that I can train in the water during those February months because the other ones they just kind of shut down. And so, I know that may not be what prospective owners want to hear, but a lot of what I try to push for is, just kind of that personality. I love seeing, more times than not, if the dog has just got a huge motor and he is you can just see it's got a ton of go in it. More times than not, they're going to be okay. Typically, if you see one that's a little bit not softer, but maybe a little bit more cautious, sometimes that might be the situation where they may get a little bit cooler because, it's that's kind of what I've seen in the past. I'd probably push, the coat piece. I've seen that. We're taking enough measures nowadays and just being responsible. We don't ever really get the dog close to being in that life threatening situation. If that makes sense.
Sure.
So.
Now you're getting, deep out into the flooded timber, but I'm assuming, you're getting back there by boat and
Mhm.
you got stuff on the boat, whether it's wool blankets or a Mr. Buddy
Yep.
heater or whatever to
Yep.
kind of, get dogs or people warm in case of emergency, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's I've been a bit advocate for kind of telling people that it's not necessarily the water and swimming that makes the dog, go into hypothermia. Yes, if you're at that level, but if it's 25 degrees and the dog's swimming and it's fine and it gets out and it sits on a dog stand and it doesn't have a vest, and in the Boykin that may dry a little bit slower, and you may have 30-mile-an-hour winds. That's when you're in a situation where they're just going to turn into ice, and then down in their pelvic region where they may not have a coat, it just can turn into ice, and so that's where you get dangerous. And so what I try to tell people is don't just think about the air temp, is think about the wind as well. Because if you're sitting in a lot of wind, and even though it may be 30 degrees, if you've got 30 miles an hour winds, you're going to be in a dangerous situation if you're not careful. Not to mention if it's a slow hunt and they pick up that first bird and then it may be 30, 40 minutes before they get another one. Um, So what I'll always tell people is just, sometimes you got to bring it, you may just wrap them in a jacket. You got to be able to watch your dog and understand, at what point is it crossing the line and is it getting dangerous? And you need to be able to recognize those things.
Sure. Yeah. The duck hunting that I do, especially, the duck hunting that I do now, it's mostly, in a boat or in a
Mm-hmm.
blind on the shore. We don't have a ton of, I can't think of any places in Indiana where I hunt that's flooded timber off the top of my head. There's
Yeah.
some that I'd like to, but they're always dry in the
The,
fall. So it doesn't, in the springtime, they're loaded with ducks. And
yep.
in the fall, it's
Yep.
dry.
That's right.
But, um, but in the boat, it's easy because you're inside the boat, inside a blind, and there's not a lot of wind ripping through. And
Mm-hmm.
you've got the heater right there and the wool blankets right there.
Yep.
But yeah, when you're out in the timber on, your dog's sitting on a tree stand or whatever, it's a different story, right?
Man, the amount of times that I have had a Mr. Buddy here contraption hanging off a tree by a limb, trying to angle just right on the dog, and then something moves and then it falls in the water. I mean, I have
Yeah.
been through some buddy heaters, trying to get that dog warm. But what I have found, and that's it's tough. Oftentimes I'm standing waist deep, next to a tree, and he's sitting on a stand, and when you got to have a tree just right in order to get that heater set up on them. That's why it's just, it really just depends on the situation. But yeah, that's what I've done.
And are you hunting with a vest on your dog, or
It
when you need to,
depends.
or
It depends. That's a very, um, it's an interesting topic talking about hunting with a vest because yeah, go back, 12 years ago when I first started getting into this was, I'd have a vest on the dog anytime I hunted. It didn't matter how, I mean, it'd be 50 degrees outside, but there's, vests can get pretty scary if you're not cautious. And a lot of times what you don't realize is that, the vest can do more harm than good. And so, specifically hunting in woods. So in my situation, when I say we're hunting woods, that can vary from, buckbrush to cypress sloughs to thickets. I mean, we may hunt something that may not have a tree anywhere in sight, but it's a lot of thick cover.
sure,
Um, a vest is a situation where it can drown a dog. And trust me, I've had plenty of scary situations where I've had a dog that will get out, make the retrieve. They're coming back because when they see it fall, they're gonna make the retrieve. They're gonna make pick the mark. They're gonna come back, and in certain situations, I've seen them. They'll get tangled up in a buckbrush thicket, and they're stuck. And if they're in a situation where it may be a little bit deeper out in the hole, well, now what are you going to do? Right. So it's either you're going to have to get out there and swim. You may not have the boat next to you where you can get them. So I try to minimize vests unless, I can kind of recognize any risk associated with it. Don't get me wrong. I do love a vest for certain applications, but for a lot of the stuff that we hunt, it can be dangerous, and it needs to be moderated. If that makes sense.
yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And again, my experience in the flooded timber is it's exactly zero. So just something that we don't have to think about here.
Mm-hmm.
It does get cold enough here, especially towards the end of our waterfowl season, that you will put a vest on your dog, and we're generally hunting lakes and rivers
Mm-hmm.
and ponds, and
Yeah.
small lakes and ponds. So you can certainly get away with it,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. We had a big freeze last year. I guess it was around New Year's, maybe New Year's or Christmas. I can't remember, but we had a big freeze come through. I'm sure you were probably part of that.
Oh
And
yeah,
we were in the. I mean, we were in the we were in the zeros. I mean, we were in some of the negatives. I mean, it was just absolute brutal cold. And we couldn't hunt anything in the woods or in our fields. All we could hunt were the big rivers. And we were killing a lot of ducks, and we had a lot of success, but with that, Waylon, one of my males, I did hunt him with a vest that day because he was hunting in open water. Um, Regardless if he had the vest, that was not the sole factor of keeping him safe. And there was a that was kind of one of those situations where I had to evaluate, is it safe or is it not? And my threshold is typically I don't hunt anything sub 18 degrees unless I'm in a situation where I'm easy accessibility to a boat. I'm able to get back to the boat ramp. And I'm also in a situation where I can take care of the dog and really just watch him. And so in this situation, we're hunting on the riverbank. I've got the boat right next to us. I've got everything that I need, and there's no concerns there. And so, had a good hunt. We hunted him in a vest. I definitely think it helped. But I also was able to kind of wrap him in that jacket to knock that wind and to hold in that body temperature to just keep his body from freezing up.
Yeah,
So,
sure. Because I mean, again, these are smaller dogs. I mean, you're looking at a 30-ish pound dog, plus or minus. So
mhm.
you're not talking about an 80-pound chessie that's
Yep.
that can gut it out, right?
Yep. Yep. That's right.
I mean, I've got friends with Boykins in Pennsylvania and stuff, but when you don't see them out on the Chesapeake Bay
Hmm.
in January,
Yeah.
going for divers, it's not
Yeah.
not what you're going to see him doing, but you'll see him flushing some quail around that time of year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's tell me this. What's your experience with Boykins?
my experience with Boykins is exactly two dogs and only ever hunted over one, and it was over quail. And the other one is a dog from hunting lines that was purchased with the intent of flushing birds of upland hunting, and
Oh,
that poor dog has not seen, to the best of my knowledge, has never had a bird shot over it.
yeah.
And he'll be 6 here, and he's the same age as my poodle pointer, so he'll be 6 in about a month.
And unfortunately, I think that historically speaking, I think that that dog probably makes up about 80% of the breed and the population that we have of the breed right now.
Yeah.
Um, that's going back, I think that number is even greater going back to the 10, 15, 20 years ago, where it was just such a small group of individuals that really campaigned them and hunted them like they were supposed to. Um, with the power of social media, it's definitely helped get the breed the recognition. But with that comes a lot of responsibility on breeders and individuals to kind of and potential buyers to understand, you know, really what is the breed for? Because I think the golden retriever is a breed that at one point, it seems like I didn't even realize when I was a kid, I didn't even realize that Goldens were excellent hunters until I started getting older. I've got a good friend of mine that's got an excellent golden retriever, but all of the Goldens that I grew up were never in a hunting family. They were never campaigned for it. They were always that extremely docile, relaxed, very chill personality, and not that high drive like you see a lot of these field Goldens coming out of now. So, with that, it's kind of that's kind of a lot of the purpose and kind of what I'm doing, and really just kind of my aspirations is just to kind of continue that piece and show them that hey, they can do everything that I want to do, and they can do it with a lot of style.
Well, and they should be doing
Yeah.
that, right? That's what the dogs want to do. If we're going to anthropomorphize it, those dogs want to get out and run. They want to retrieve and they want to flush, and they
Yeah.
want to, the, they're a popular breed in the Southeast because
Yep.
those were, plantation retrievers and flushers back, 100
Yep.
years ago, right? And, you
Yep.
see tons of them in South Carolina and, all over the
Hmm.
U.S. Southeast. And the the unfortunate side of it is that they're pretty dogs, and pretty dogs, especially pretty smaller dogs, are going to be popular with
Yep.
non-hunters,
Yep.
right? And it really is to the detriment to the dog, and potentially or eventually to the detriment of the breed, right?
Yeah.
Just like with the Goldens.
Well, and I'll tell you, I think there's a lot of individuals in our community that are doing a great job. I mean, and I'll tell you, as far as other breeders and the Boykin Spaniel Society, they do a lot of things really good as well. There's differing opinions in a lot of areas, which is expected. But all in all, it's no lack of effort from everybody to continue it, right, and to continue the improvement. And so, I think. as the breed continues to grow, I think if there's one thing that, the BSS has done well is really, set up a lot of success in the future and just kind of knowledge. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there's some improvement in some areas, but overall, I think, we've done a good job of being familiar with, maybe the threats that the breed is faced in the future and trying to help mitigate that before it happens. Um, with that obviously starts with responsible breeding, but also really understanding, good breeding and taking into consideration all factors when you're going to breed and not just saying, it's easy to just, slap the easy button on something or just say, hey, we're not going to breed, um, you know, a carrier to a clear dog. We're just going to remove any type of genetic breedings that are right now favored, and there's good reason for that. So I could go down a rabbit hole with that, but there's a lot of effort there from everybody, and look forward to kind of seeing that continue in the years.
Yeah, and it's important to just continue to grow that community. And breeders do a lot, of course, to make responsible breeding decisions. A lot of times the most important decision that a breeder makes, though, is who to pair that puppy with, right? And if whenever possible, my goal as a breeder is to always pair my puppies to hunting homes. That is my number one priority.
Yep.
I can't say that I'm going to be able to do that perfectly, but it is a goal, and every litter, that's where I start.
Yep. It's funny too because it's something that in our application process, I'll just tell you, we don't, I don't have 10 litters a year. I mean, I may have 1 to 2 per year
Mm-hmm.
right now. This next year I'll probably have 2, possibly 3, and that will be the most that I've ever had in a year. It's just kind of how the stars align with the dogs. I have, Fancy's one of my main females she's actually in heat right now that, you know, she had a rough, her litter that she had about a year ago. She got mastitis, had some trouble.
Mm.
She fully recovered. She had a heat and she had her second heat after that. We kind of let her regroup and she got to this one. She's doing really good, but we decided, I'm going to hunt her this year. I'm going to hunt her. We've got nationals coming up in April. I'm just going to kind of really give her a break, and I'll probably breed her right after nationals next year. Same with some other ones. Situation. It really just kind of depends. I'm not a breed every cycle breeder. I do try and you know understand. I know that that's kind of. I know that that may be the natural way is for them to be bred, but that's just a lot of it. There are a lot of risk in breeding, and first and foremost is that these dogs live with us. I mean, I've got Fancy back here sniffing the door trying to get in here. So, they live with us, and so it's not a. I can't refer to them as a stock because they are our companions that obviously have mixed in with business, which is it gets complicated and you get emotionally attached to them, and it's something that you really want to make sure that they're healthy and they're safe, and it's something that we try to take into consideration before we breed. So
I can relate to that 100%. There are tough decisions to make, and even this last little male small Munsterlander that I started, when I got him from the breeder, we got him as an agreement that the breeder would give him to me, I would start him, would sell him, and we split. And but he didn't have a home when I got him. There was no end state for that dog. We were looking for the right home for him, and then he was I would say, a well-started dog. We didn't know it until we hunted him, and turned out that yes, he was, I think, a very well-started dog at that point. Not a finished dog, certainly. I mean, he was only 5 months old, but really off to a good start. And very quickly we found a home for that dog, and I was on my way up to the Upper Peninsula on the phone with the puppy buyer, and on my way back from that trip, I dropped Jax off in Kalamazoo and cried like a baby when I dropped him off, because I didn't realize how quickly I'd gotten attached to really what is part of the business, right? Yeah. Not even a puppy that I bred, just had him with me in my kennel for a few months.
Oh yeah. No, it is a it is a tough business to, I've got, my associate trainer that works for me, Jake, he's been with me a little over a year. He's been heavily involved on the training side over the last year. And he got to see some of the litters but it hasn't been until this, our big training season is during the summer, spring, typically after turkey season, is when we really gear up with training. And we start this year, he was able to spend a good 6 to 8 months with a good group of dogs. And I, I could see it in his eyes, that level of, kind of that sadness when they all went home. And so I've been able to kind of I've been able to overcome that at a point, but I could see that level of kind of really attachment back to him to just kind of show you, and honestly, I feel like if if you don't have that feeling, it's when I need to stop doing that, right? Is that
Yeah.
if I don't have that level of connection with the dog that we're training or breeding, then I need to think about another occupation or doing something different.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of perks to being in this business, and the
Yeah.
connection with the dogs is it's not the smallest of the perks, right? I think that's a pretty
Yeah,
good
it's
one.
tough. It
Right.
is the highest highs and some very, very low. I mean, it's very lows if you're not careful.
Sure. So HRC stuff is it's starting to heat up, right?
It's slowing down now. So the
Okay.
HRC, yeah, so it's starting to slow down. We've typically you'll start to see some of them trickle around and into February. My big season, and I'll be honest, I don't push to be a huge hunt test trainer. I'll run 3 or 4 a year. That's not what a majority of my clients are looking for, and really what I'm doing. I'm a heavy advocate for getting a really good hunting dog and bird dog. Don't get me wrong, there are tons of fantastic trainers out there that have really excel in hunt test and taken that dog to a finished level. The difference I would say I am from maybe some of those other guys is that the commitment that it takes to get to that finish level retriever is about 10% of the people that call me, and just the commitment that it takes, financially, as well as the timing of it, right? Is some of these guys, you may have to, if you want a true finished Boykin, you're going to have the dog with a trainer at least 12 months, if not longer. And it's probably going to have to be, they may try to break that up some. So, some owners are going to they're going to want their dog. And so that's tough. A lot of the HRC stuff that we run is here locally. It typically varies, we can, but yeah, that's kind of what we're running. Typically the timing whenever I get dogs. So right now, the dogs that we have in training are all that we've had for about 3 months now. And so what happens is I'll have these kind of around hunting season towards the first of the year, and then they'll go home. Um, right now, just to kind of put it into perspective, I got a group of, let's say, I typically will get them in around 7 or 8 months. Normally spend 4 to 5 months for them, get them to that started level, essentially where they're marking and retrieving birds, steady to shot, walking off lead on heel, and really where they're to the kind of the lowest point of truly being able to hunt. Now that's obviously a dog that's typically under a year old, so they're in that realm. Um, Fast forward, they went home, and now fast forward into the end of the year. Now we've got all those dogs getting ready to come back in January. So we've got a handful that we're going to try to take the nationals to run this year, and then we'll kind of gear up to kind of go into that next level of season, into the spring with HRC. So
And now when you're running HRC events, these are these are all retrieving breed events, right? So you're running your Boykins against labs and against other, other sporting breeds, right?
yep, and it's not necessarily like a trial where we're competing against the dog. You're more or less competing against the test. So an HRC event is, it's essentially broken out. Normally, you'll have a started, a seasoned, a finished. In some cases, you may have an upland, and uplands are not as common, um, just because of the how much it takes to put one on. I love them. Don't get me wrong. I do love to run them. I wish we had more of them. It's just there's not many clubs that do it. Now, you can have a club with an HRC club that could have, I mean, they're liable to have, you can have one that may just have one flight of season, one flight of started, and one flight of finish. And then you can have some other ones that may have six flights of finish, two or three flights of season, and maybe two flights of started. So there's a lot bigger events in certain areas than others. So
Okay. And how do you think the Boykins as a whole, like as a breed, do in those events?
I would say, I would say the Boykin is the success rate on a Boykin is much lower than you would see on a retriever. Now, where if you go to a hunt test and if you look on Hunt Secretary, you're looking at the sheet. Um, you're also looking at you may look at 100 labs for every 8 Boykins, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that the engagement on Boykins is going to be much lower than you would see
Hmm.
on a lab. So now the success rate. Now, don't get me wrong. I have seen tons of Boykins excel from others where they've been running and finished. There was another dog that passed the grand this year with Butch Herb. Really, really nice dog, but the success rate you'll see is a little bit lower.
Hmm. Do you think so? I just I think about my small monster landers and testing in Navda, and there are plenty of judges out there that are used to seeing, or I won't say used to seeing because they see all breeds, but
Mhm.
everybody favors a certain style of hunter, and there are plenty of judges out there that favor short hairs, wire hairs, poodle pointers, that kind of a dog that's going to be maybe a little bigger running,
Yeah.
bigger dog for a certain, and a very, very hard stop, staunch point, right? And in
Yep.
a lot of the versatile breeds, you won't necessarily see that. Our small monster landers are known to work a little bit closer. They will look softer in their point in general. And I've had plenty of other small monster lander people argue with me and tell me my dog is super staunch. And I'm great. I'm happy for you that your dog is super staunch. Across the breed, we're not known
Mhm.
for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so do you think that because of Boykin may work a little bit differently than the more ubiquitous, more common dog that kind of affects them in the test?
Absolutely. I mean, you said it earlier, it's the style. And, if there's one thing, take away that if anybody can get, off of this is that if you're going to get a Boykin because you just like the looks, but you want it to do everything that a lab will do, well, that's probably not the right reasons, right? So if you want to get a Boykin because of the qualities that a Boykin has and you like watching them hunt, well, then you're doing it for the right reasons. And so while I think over time, I think the breed is going to continue to improve to get to that level where we are competing a lot higher, you know, towards that where you're seeing them compete at a higher level towards that running. You see a lot more passes in the grand. You see a lot more Boykins that are getting their finish title. Um, I think it's important for people to understand that what they're getting right now is that they may not have that. Now, if you go watch a Boykin. And in my opinion, this is why I'm a strictly Boykin guy. And I just love to watch them work. I love to watch their style. I love to watch their personality. They've got some spunk and they've got tons of get up. They're always looking back at you. If you know, not necessarily during the retrieve, but they're always looking for that next one. And I love that enthusiasm. Um, it's kind. I try to say it's a cross between a cocker and a lab because it's not quite as spastic I would say as watching a cocker run, but it's got a mix of that where you can still see that level of excitement. Um, so I want people to understand too is that you know I'm not solely out to take my Boykin to be the next grand retriever, right? That's not my sole focus. Now, my focus right now that I really want to focus on is just to get the breed to a level where it's continuing to improve. They're able to flip that switch on and off from the house and in the field, and also to really be able to get that ability where to be honest, the dogs that I train is that there's some of them that have got it, and there's some that are much easier to train, and there's some of them that take a lot longer. What I'm trying to do is figure out how can we get more of those ones that's a pleasure to train as opposed to the ones that really takes a lot to get it out of them? Does that make sense? So,
Absolutely.
yep.
And I think, a really important thing that you brought up too is for, basically for the average customer, right? For the
Hmm.
average hunter who, your average puppy buyer hunter may be hunting 20 days a year.
Hmm.
And, whereas, there are some people out there that are hardcore hunters that are going to hunt 90, 100 or more days out of the year with
Yeah.
their dogs, right? But the average hunter is just not doing that. And they have to
Mhm.
have the right fit for them in their
Yeah.
home with their family.
Absolutely. And I'll say that because it's they're fully capable of doing that. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got some that are more so than others, but they are fully capable of hunting that 30, 40, 50 day season. Now, it's it all comes back to what we were talking about with that cold piece, right? It's the personality, and it just depends on how much does the dog want it? I can't train a dog to want to go get it. It's got to at least have some of it. Now, I'm not a I'm a minimal force trainer where I will train with a collar if I need to, but it's something where I don't try to resort to a collar to I'm not going to use stimulus in order to get the dog to go retrieve. Does that make sense? The dog has
Sure.
got to want it. Um, I will refer back to a collar if the dog for certain areas, whether we start getting into a little bit more advanced into some more advanced work. But for the most part, I want that dog to love it just as much as I do, and then we can clean it up where we need with later.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the collar for proofing. I like the collar if I need to get the dog to go further, faster, or
Mhm.
harder. I love the collar for that. Um, I do sometimes, I won't say sometimes, I would do rely on the collar for correction
Oh yeah,
sometimes but only for, it's for when the dog knows they're doing something wrong,
oh yeah.
they're gonna feel that one. So
Oftentimes, I try to use verbal commands. I'll try to use verbal corrections, and in this case, perfect examples. We've got a dog that just went home named Jax, and he just got picked up yesterday, and Jax really struggled with trying to stay focused. He came off force fetch, came off the table, or on the ground, and he was the type of dog that's just got tons and tons of drive, and I would give those verbal corrections, and he knew what he was doing was wrong, but I couldn't really get him reined back in. And you know, we started talking with his owner. I started revisiting, and I broke the collar back out, and I started using that tone piece on the collar with my command and that verbal correction, and then with a light stimulus. And once I started doing that, man, he cleaned it up, and I'll tell you, he is. I had him for 6 months, and he is a phenomenal dog now for the time we've had him. And so I'm really excited about him. He's coming back. He's one of the dogs that's coming back. Um, I think his owner is going to run him in novice this year at nationals. So he's just it's a fun dog to hand. But that's an example of something where I try not to rely on it, but it's something it's kind of a tool in the shed if we need it.
yeah, absolutely. And silly to not use it. The tool's available, and
Yeah.
if you know how to use it, then
Yeah.
you should it should be
Yep.
handy. So looking forward to ducks. I mean, they should be. You guys should be starting to think about some ducks making their way down towards you pretty soon.
Yeah, we are dry in Arkansas right now.
Ugh.
It's been pretty dry, but I got some texts that going today. We've got a group, but I've got some texts going today where I think the White River is jumping up to 20 something feet, which is a huge. There's a ton of rain coming in, which is great. Um, it's hard to get ducks without water, so
Yeah.
it's getting that right now will really help our season, or at least that front end, because normally the woods really don't load up until later in the year, which it's kind of it's kind of one of those things. If we can get water in the woods, and normally we may not be able to kill them, but at least we can get out and try.
You can call to him and shoot at him, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't seen a lot here. Usually I know it's time to start scouting for ducks when I'm seeing sandhill cranes, and that makes it easy for me. You can't hunt sandhills here, but when they start landing in the fields just south of my house, then I know the ducks are around, and that's when I know I need to get out and start looking. But we haven't seen a big woodcock flight either. So I think it's just so darn warm that all the birds that we want are staying up north. But
Yep.
why fly if you don't have to, right?
Yeah, we actually get a huge push of sandhills here in North Alabama. Really, the Wheeler Wildlife Refuge is just west of us in Huntsville, and it's we get tons of them. They just opened the season up a couple of years ago, so it's been. I don't ever hunt them just because it's you got to draw a tag, and I don't ever mess with it. But they are here, so
Be pretty funny to watch a Boykin retrieve a sandhill crane, though. That's a whole lot of
and I
bird
don't.
right there.
I'll tell you, man, that's a lot of bird, and that's a lot of angry bird if
It
you don't
could
get them
be.
down.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
better make sure that bird's good dead.
yep. We're gearing up. I know right now with where the weather's going, I know we're it's starting to cool off a little bit, so we're starting to get them a little bit more out in the field. We've got some buddies that are starting to get some quail out. We're starting to kind of dip into some of that now and kind of getting the dogs geared up and trying to change gears, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I'm hoping to get a hunt or two in this week before these puppies drop here in a few days, and then I know I'll be locked into the whelping box for a little while, just kind of
Yeah.
babysitting, making sure mama's doing the right thing. So,
Yep. Yep. We just had a baby a few weeks ago, so we're
oh my goodness, a
we're
human
dad.
baby,
Do what?
a human baby.
Human baby. Yeah.
Oh wow,
1 month old. Yep.
congratulations,
Thank you. Thank you. So,
boy or girl?
little boy.
Yeah, is this your first or?
Our first. Yeah. That's
Oh,
our first little boy.
oh wow, how
I just need
awesome
him to
is
start
that?
helping clean out kennels now.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can teach him to operate a poop scoop
Yeah.
before as soon as he starts walking, then you're good to
Yep.
go. They make
Yep.
waders really small too. I have had them for
Yeah.
my kids.
That's
So
right. That's right.
that's awesome. Michael, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Um, can you go ahead and close this out real quick though?
Yeah. I don't know, I think if there's anything that, I want people to understand is that, Boykins are a really fun breed. And, there's something that once you watch them and you get to spend some time with them and see their ability to kind of flip the switch in the house and in the field, they're really a versatile breed of just kind of being able to do everything. And, I think trying to disassociate themselves and not try to make them, um, not try to hyper focus and make it seem like they're just another type of lab or another type of chessie. They're their own breed and their own style. And so I hope people understand that when they are looking to get a Boykin is don't just expect a lab and then out of a Boykin. You need to understand and look at them and hunt with them and really make sure you like it and hopefully find one that can spend the rest 12, 13, 14 years with you.
And if wife's on the fence about a dog, you show her a Boykin, and she's a lot more likely to say, "Ooh, we want one of
It
those."
helps. It helps. Yep. It does help.
Good looking little dogs. I don't know. I love Boykins.
They're
So
cool. Yeah, they're
yeah.
fun.
How can people contact you if they want to get a hold of you?
So we've got a website, it's valleywaykennels.com. My phone, I'm an open book. I'm very transparent. If I don't answer your call, I will call you back. We've got my emails on the website as well. We've got our socials. We've got a Facebook group as well as an Instagram handle too. So that's really the best way to get in touch. Like I said, if I don't respond immediately, I will get to it. And I am right now. It's a one man show mainly. I've got a helper, but I will get to it eventually.
And a YouTube channel as
Yep,
well, right?
yep, we do. Yep, we've got a YouTube channel. Trying to continue to push that. It's definitely a time sink at times, and so it's funny when I started doing the YouTube, it was something that I was really just doing it for fun with, and fast forward 8 or 9 years later, I was realizing the majority of the people were finding me through YouTube, and I started realizing, man, the quality is just not there, and the content is not very good. It's the message is there, but it's just I needed to improve it. So I've tried to regain that and improve that. So there is some there are some resources there for others and to see some Boykins working.
Sounds great. Well, Michael, thanks so much for being
Yes,
on the
sir.
show. It's great talking to you. Great talking Boykins.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 42 of the Wool Post podcast. And if you did, please leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. Remember to like and follow the Wool Post on Facebook and Instagram. Share the podcast with all of your friends. And if you're so inclined, join our Patreon community at patreon.com/the Wool Post. Stay steady and God bless.